again, Steve here, and today I wanted to talk a little bit about Nuchter. I don't know if I pronounced that right. Any Dutchman in the room, any Dutch woman in the room will definitely tell me that I said that wrong. So I mentioned this in a blog a couple of days ago, this word, and I think it's spelled Nuchter. It's a Dutch word, which means, as far as I know, sober. Somebody who's quite calm, collected, makes decisions rather rational, perhaps, sober. And I heard about this word first from a Dutchman, who I happen to know, and he happened to mention that the Dutch are nuchter, something like that. They got to get that with the CH, I think. And it reminded me actually of another Dutchman that I know of. He was a friend of the family. A number of years ago, I was visiting back to the town of my youth, and there was an old Dutchman there who was a very good friend of the family, who happens to be very nuchter. And I was talking to him for a bit, and I had forgotten at the time how the Dutch tend to be, because, hey, nationality is not such a social construct. I mean, people behave the way their culture kind of behaves, and I notice this with other people too in certain parts of Europe. They don't seem to have much in the way of emotions. And I was telling him this story, and he was just standing there like a statue, listening to me. And at one point, it almost felt like I wasn't sure if he had a pulse. He was a pretty old guy, but he was still standing, so I guess he did. But when I was finished, he began to comment very briefly. But it was really odd because it's hard for me to get used to, because I come from, my wife's side is Mexican. They're definitely not nuchter. At least they're very emotional, right? And my mom's side being French, they're definitely not nuchter either in some ways, because they're very emotional. And actually I was mentioning to this same Dutch guy, not the old guy, the guy who told me about the word before. And we were talking about the riots and everything in the United States, and he happened to make the comment that Americans, from a Dutch perspective, are very passionate people. They're very rowdy in a way, right? And I think there's something that we can learn, absolutely something we can learn from the Dutch on this. I mean, they've been a very successful people. I would argue that they're some of the most intelligent people in the world, because based on, but it might not be intelligent. It might have a lot to do with their emotional control. If you think about, I was reading somewhere that of the innovations, the major innovations in the last several hundred years, like 90-something% of it came from basically kind of Anglo-Saxon and periphery of that. It's huge amounts, right, have come out of that. And there are different personality traits, for sure, like conscientiousness and IQ and all this sort of thing. But I think this tendency to be nuchter, this tendency to be very sober, very calm, very collected, and not really do anything other than what you feel is effective. This old guy, he was just standing there. He wasn't even moving. Because moving, of course, would be a waste of energy in a way while he was listening, right? Because his focus was listening. He was very sober in his listening. And I think there's a lot we can learn from this. It's very masculine in a way, and I think the Dutch tend to be that way, very masculine. And very effective. I mean, if you've ever lived where Dutch people live, things are in order. Things are clean. Things are orderly. They get things done. They're some of the most effective farmers in the world, and you've got to be very, very patient. Very nuchter to be a very good farmer, I would say. I mean, the word boer means farmer, apparently, and this is who built up South Africa to the great country. The great and effective country. Yeah, there was, human rights violations, of course there were. At least that's what we're told. But I'm talking about the actual individual farmers who farmed, who arrived in South Africa where there was nobody at the time in most of the places, and built up the wilderness into effective first world country, right? And the Dutch, of course, is a very, very small country, if you think about it, but they had a huge empire around the world. they're very effective that way. They're great traders, great farmers, great. And of course, I visited the Netherlands a year or so ago, less than a year ago, and the family and I, we drove around a good part of Western Europe. And of all the places I was, the Netherlands was the tidiest and most put together place there is. I mean, absolutely pristine in the small villages and so on, about how they take care of things. It's just, and the people are just peaceful and calm and Nuchter. I think we can learn a lot from this, because I believe very strongly that we can practice being this. We can practice being sober. We can practice relaxing. Probably meditation, prayer, thought, contemplation, and of course connection to our personal God that we may have. All of these things I think can help us to relax, to be less passionate. And not that passionate is anything wrong with that. I mean, I love cultures that are very vibrant in their energy and their emotion and so on. But I think it's important for us to know who's in charge of our lives, and who's responsible for how we behave and what it is that we get done. And if we give way to our passions, if we let our passions take control of us, and we let our ego take control of us, and all of that sort of stuff, we become less Nuchter. There's a little mouse running out of his house through the bush here. With Nuchter, we become more effective, I think, because there's lots of personality traits that maybe we don't have control over, like IQ, right? It's largely genetic and largely formative years developed, which of course by now we're past that, right? But there's conscientiousness. That's another aspect of ourselves that we can help ourselves with. And this is with practice we can, follow up on what we said we're going to do, which is essentially conscientiousness. And we can practice being more controlled, more sober in our approach to life, and being more like the Dutch. I think we can learn a lot from them, because they're an example of a culture that's very well put together, very well behaved, and very effective in getting on with what they're going to do, and achieving great levels of success. I think we can learn a lot from that. And in life, a lot of times I think the more we can learn from people who we admire, and we don't have to become them, but we can learn from them, right? It's just like a good teacher. We don't want to become the teacher, but we can learn from the teacher, right? Because the teacher ultimately should know more, if they're a teacher, than we do. And when we kind of exhaust their knowledge, or the instructor, when we exhaust their knowledge, then we have to move on, right? But I mean, as an example of a society that's successful and held up over many, many years, I think the Dutch is one that we can learn a lot from, especially along the lines of their ability to be nuchter. So let's learn from that and help to empower our inner genie journeys. Steve here, great chatting. If you like what I'm doing, please like, subscribe, and sharing. Hey, you know what? A couple of subscribers a week, that is absolutely fantastic. I appreciate everybody who's chimed in, and we're getting close to a big 3-0 in subscribers on the Inner Genie channel. So by all means, recommend it to your friends. I ask nothing more, nothing less. So I look forward to that. I look forward to your comments and your thumbs up and your shares and so on. Talk again soon. Bye for now.